Hey everybody out there in the Bosshole Transformation Nation. So good to have you with us on this episode of the Bosshole Chronicles. I'm your co-host, John Broer, and that means you're also going to hear from my friend and best amazing partner ever, Sarah Best. She is the best. What can I say? Today we're going to be talking about a topic that I've wanted to discuss for quite some time now, and it's the whole idea of RTO. And that stands for Return to Office. A big, I don't know, I've been getting so many articles and seeing so much information about this Return to Office movement. It was big shortly after the pandemic began to subside. And a lot of companies got super aggressive in mandating that people come back to the office. And now they're regretting that. And yet there is still more conversation around that. And I think there should be conversation. But I think that conversation needs to include a lot of people. And by a lot of people, I mean our employees, our individual contributors, the people that this will impact the most. So today we're going to unpack some really helpful articles. Go to the show notes. You will find all of them and talk about the return to office trend and what it represents. Let's dive in. The Bosshole Chronicles are brought to you by Real Good Ventures, a talent optimization firm helping organizations diagnose their most critical people and execution issues with world-class analytics. Make sure to check out all the resources in the show notes and be sure to follow us and share your feedback. Enjoy today's episode. Hey Sarah, how you doing? Good to see you.
Hey, John. Good to see you too. It's always fun to have to be at the mics together. And I think that, there's been a resounding theme. Clients have been chatting about this. We've been reading these articles. You've been researching this. So I think it's important for you to tell us what our topic is for today.
Absolutely. Happy to do that. This is a sensitive topic, and it's one that has been percolating ever since the pandemic started to taper off, and that is the return to office policy. And we needed a brand new acronym because we don't have enough. So RTO, I keep seeing RTO. So what's your RTO policy or strategy? But this return to office policy. And the articles, Sarah, you gave me a great article. I've been getting a lot of great articles from, Sherm from Harvard Business Review. You shared one with me from Forbes Edge, which was published in LinkedIn, and we'll put these all in the show notes. But let me just go back really quick. From a personal experience perspective, I had a colleague, CEO, that was talking about shortly after the pandemic that said, we're going to have everybody come back to the office. And essentially it was a mandate. And so I just want you to remember that word mandate.
Yeah. That
they were going to make them come back to the office. And he just asked me, he said, well, what do you think about it? And I said, well, it's your company. You and the executive team, you can mandate whatever you want. You just have to be prepared to lose people. And that actually kind of surprised him.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, really? And I said, yeah. I said, the world of work has totally changed, and it's not going to go back to the pre-pandemic framework, the thing that we've all been familiar with. The world of work is different, and therefore it takes a different strategy and a different approach. Fortunately, what he and the executive team did is they actually went out and really kind of surveyed and had informal conversations with folks, and they said, oh no, I love my remote work arrangement. And if you were to tell me that I had to come back to the office, in all honesty, I would be leaving. And that really altered the way they approached it. But not everybody's doing that. And so we're hearing stories about organizations that are mandating that people are coming back to the work, and then they are shocked why people are leaving. So I wanted to have a conversation around this. And I think, Sarah, at least let's acknowledge that there are some jobs in an organization that have to be done in the office. Right. They just can't be done remotely, whether it's in a manufacturing capacity or administrative capacity. There are just some things that have to be done in an office because that's where it functions. But then everything, beyond that, what do we do with those jobs? So I would love to hear. We work within a lot of the same organizations. You have your fingers on the pulse of what's going on out there. I mean, what are you hearing or what are you sensing in terms of this whole return to work movement?
I would first say, John, that people are all over the map.
Yeah.
There isn't a consistent theme or trend. Some of the things I picked up on are the ideas that somehow productivity is less, like we're not getting as much done because
Right.
the workforce is at home. But I'd also have to say that there's a fair amount of our clients who feel comfortable with a pretty organized hybrid situation. And I think, John, when we were discussing this topic prior to the show, you were talking about research around getting together, with
Mm-hmm.
your colleagues. Maybe you can touch on that in a quick minute, because I think it's relevant here that an organized hybrid situation has leaders feeling more productive or feeling more successful or feeling better about their workforce. This is such a tricky situation. It's such muddy water.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly, the other thing that's out there in the research and people can attest to firsthand is it's not going to be getting clear anytime soon,
Right.
because there's still economic unrest and challenge, political things, on the horizon. So we've got all that our clients are dealing with.
Oh, sure. And let's go back to a very common theme our listeners have heard from us, and that is this this movement from command and control to
Yeah.
trust and autonomy. And we love to use the analogy, and we borrowed this directly from Aaron Dignan, but the difference between the stoplight intersection and a roundabout.
Right.
Our command and control work environment, we still have a lot of carryover from that. And we still have a lot of management practices that are rooted in command and control. So when everybody went home and we had to deal with the pandemic and we had a remote workforce, there were managers and business owners that felt that they have totally lost control. And that's what they're used to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the answer to that is not trying to regain control and mandate, but start to realize that this trust and autonomy work environment is something you need to embrace and start to think about how different your culture will look. Now, it's not going to go away, but the one thing that I thought was really interesting, and this was actually published by Breitbart, who republished a CNBC report or a CNBC study, that recently a sizable majority of company leaders are rethinking their return to office intentions. In other words, with 80% expressing regret over their earlier choices. In other words, that heavy-handed command and control. Because what happened is they got pushback. They got people, and right now, the labor market is so tight and talent is so hard to come by. Who can possibly afford to drop the hammer and say, you will be back at the office? Now, there are some companies doing it. I'm not going to mention them, but there are some huge companies that are doing that. And they're getting a lot of pushback and resistance.
Right.
What I find so fascinating about this, Sarah, is, we said we're going to accommodate the needs of the pandemic and set you up and you're going to work remotely. And at that point, people started to realize, oh my gosh, I don't have a 90-minute commute. I can see my kids to the bus. I can spend a little bit more time with my parents who live with me and I'm caring for them. We opened up a quality of life or an aspect of work-life balance that before that time did not exist.
That's right.
And guess what? People loved it. There is one example, and again, I don't want to name any specific organization, but there were people that when they went remote, the organization said, yep, we'll fully support this. They actually moved away. They moved to a different state, or they moved well away from any kind of a commuting distance to be able to get to the office. And now they're saying, well, we want you back in the office, a couple of days a week. And we're talking about states away from the office.
How does that happen? For that air travel?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That just makes no sense. Go ahead.
Well, gosh, I think that we could confidently say that a lot of this depends on, well, certainly on the work that your organization does, but on your unique market and your unique labor force. You know,
Mhm.
in this Forbes article, which we will link to in the show notes, you do have to have a subscription to read the full article, but there's enough data in just the summary article. There's so much research outlined in here that describes how in places like Microsoft, you know, when they went remote, completely remote, they had MIT study productivity, sense of connection. You know, theirs in places took a dip, in other places it accelerated or got stronger. I think that what we can be assured of is that there are some organizations who have hit it out of the ballpark because of the way they've organized the work. Maybe it's hybrid, maybe it's completely remote now. They've figured it out. There are other organizations who definitely report a lower connection, a lower sense of connectivity between employees. There are organizations that feel and can chronicle that productivity has taken a drop. But what we don't know about those situations is, as you indicated earlier, what was happening before the pandemic?
Right.
What was the culture like? What was the sense of engagement? You can't just magically create that out of thin air if it wasn't really there before.
Exactly. Yeah.
But John, you and I talked about this beforehand today. I think it's worth noting in all the cases where there was intentional gathering of the workforce. So people were completely remote, but they still had an opportunity to bring the team together, or they were hybrid and there were specific days of the week where the team would collaborate in person together. In all of those instances, engagement and productivity are reported as higher. So I think we could put a pin in the idea that even if everybody's remote, as long as you create opportunities 3 times a year, once a month, whatever it might be, to create connection. And John, tell me if I'm crazy. Is that what you took away from the research as well?
I did. And what I loved about that detail is that it's not, what they're not saying is, you know, a specific number of days in the office is the formula.
Okay.
What they were talking about is we're going to create a sense of community in a very different way. It's may not even be at the office.
Yeah.
But we're not mandating a specific cadence of time, but we're going to get together. We're going to space it out and make sure that when we do come together, it creates a sense of community and a chance just to connect rather than to make it feel like a business kind of function.
Right.
To make them feel part of a whole, even though you may be separate. No, I totally took the same thing away. I thought it was very creative, but I think that's what's necessary. I think that old framework, we need managers and business owners that are getting incredibly creative about, okay, this is a new world of work. How do we creatively establish culture, which is going to look different, but do it in different ways, which actually has a better impact? And we will be right back.
With employee disengagement at its highest level in 9 years, your company can't afford to miss the mark when it comes to optimizing your hiring, management, and team performance practices. At its lowest level, employee turnover costs you $11,000 per person, and those are dollars you can easily save with the right set of people analytics. Real Good Ventures is a talent optimization consultancy specializing in world-class analytics specific to your people and the critical role they play within your organization. Gain confidence in your hiring practices, keep the boss holes from driving your talent away, design your teams for flawless execution, and create a culture that offers meaning and fulfillment. Real Good Ventures has a family of validated diagnostic tools specific to the human aspect of business, because we know that all business issues are people issues. Visit us today at www.realgoodventures.com and bring meaning and fulfillment back into your workplace.
Okay, let's get back to the program.
I also have to call out, John, you and I, because we're wired much the same way according to our behavioral drives.
Yeah.
As autonomous, flexible, somewhat easygoing, but results-oriented people, I have to say, I know I have a bias toward that flexibility in the schedule, because that's the way I work. That's the way I'm most comfortable, is knowing that it could be in my home office one day, on site at a client for
Right.
another type of occasion, but just having a sense of freedom to do it in the way that makes sense at home. For me, that's been a huge gift, especially since the pandemic. But I know that's because that's kind of the way I work anyways. I'm sure that different leaders with differing drives for precision, accuracy, intensity, drives to be more collaborative and connected to people. Those people may struggle in a different way, but wouldn't it be great if they could figure out why they're struggling and not necessarily project the need for a resolution for them onto their entire workforce?
Yeah. Yeah. In other words, the solution for this is I just have to be able to see you work. Then I'm going to be happy. And then I'm checking this box. And that's totally unreasonable. And I think they think it's being reasonable, but it's not. I love what you said. And yes, I mean, Sara, as a persuader, me as a captain, we love our autonomy. We love our freedom. But let's face it, I love the times when we get together. So when I'm up there, now that we live in two different cities, or when Karen visits, we are very intentional about getting together, going out, breaking bread, having some fellowship. And we'll talk a little bit about work, but we really want to just connect with one another.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be mandated on a certain schedule, but we understand its benefit. We understand the value.
Yeah.
Now, there are other people on the other end of the spectrum, to your point, that connectedness, the in-person, has a greater impact. And I totally respect that. But I think this gets back to asking our business leaders and managers to hit the pause button. And I know for a while there, it was about 2 years ago, that there were a lot of surveys. Let's do a return to office survey, and let's just survey everybody.
Right.
Okay. Well, our one client did that and got some great feedback and realized we can't strong arm this because we're going to lose a lot of people. And they are continuing to flourish and grow because they took a better approach.
Yes.
But what I think it means is we should be constantly, informally and formally, just having our ear to the ground and finding out what's important to our employees. I mean, that same article from CNBC, the study found that many companies made hasty decisions based on executive opinions rather than employee data.
Yeah.
And how often does that happen? And we're all about the data. At Real Good Ventures, we are all about the data. This is data that's going to absolutely help you understand how to navigate what is a really challenging marketplace right now, for sure.
We are about the data. I feel compelled to say with some organizations, you get a report. With Real Good Ventures, you get results. Would you agree, John?
You get real good results. That's right. I would agree. Yeah. That's a nice little plug right there, Sara.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't help but do it. Yeah.
Well, and I'm reminded of Dr. Todd Dewitt when it was last year, and he talked about how organizations have to start managing by outcome versus observation. The days of constant observation and oversight of physical presence in an office, for the most part, are behind us. So again, there are some jobs that need to be done in an office, others that can be done completely remotely, and then others that probably are somewhere in between. But what I believe that also reinforces is the stuff we've been talking about is it requires a new kind of manager. It requires a different kind of manager.
It does. That's exactly right.
When you think about job fit, manager fit, and team fit, now you have to think about it in terms of, okay, job fit. Well, is this job in person? Is it fully remote? Is it a combination or a hybrid? That has to be woven into the whole idea of job fit. And then you have manager fit. Do we have managers and supervisors that are even capable and equipped and willing to manage a hybrid workforce? And I can assure you, we have a number that are struggling with that right now. And I think they've been struggling quietly for a long, long time, but they're not so quiet about it anymore because there's a lot of burnout taking place.
Well, and so that's a great segue, John. I wanted to highlight one more piece of data from the Forbes article. They talked to leaders at Atlassian, which is a software as a service company. They are responsible for Trello, which is a virtual project management software, Confluence, Jira Service Management, et cetera. At their firm, there are no in-office mandates, and 40% of their employees live more than 2 hours away from the office.
Mhm.
So they did an analysis of Atlassian to see how often remote workers needed to come together to feel more connected.
Right.
But the bottom line is, this is one of those examples where they created intentional connection for remote employees that got together for in-person team gatherings, had at least a 20% increase in engagement and connection. But I love what Annie Dean, who calls herself the head of Team Anywhere
Right.
at Atlassian, she said, for whatever reason, we keep making where we work the lightning rod when how we work is the thing in crisis.
Oh, exactly.
So doesn't that just kind of bring us right back to the idea that we have to draw the best performance out of our employees by treating them as individuals, by fitting them into the right seat and the right job, by creating managers that can adjust and adapt to meet the moment with their employees, that want to develop their employees. It's really kind of I think, an affirmation to what we always talk about, which is we need to get better at how we do this work and how we lead people in doing this work.
Absolutely. And the command and control, again, we keep trying to bring that back in, needs to give way to the idea of trust and autonomy. Not completely. I mean, it's not an either or, it's a both and, but our leaders and our managers have to be so much more evolved to be able to manage this. And, I just hope that our managers that are listening to this, who are experiencing that frustration, begin to just sort of embrace the difference. And please, for our business owners that listen in, if you're thinking about mandating something, dropping the hammer and saying, we are going to do this, boy, I would really rethink this. Read the articles, learn from people that have already made those mistakes. And I will just tell everybody, because this episode will probably publish before our episode with Jonathan Reynolds. So Jonathan Reynolds is the CEO with Titus Talent Strategies, which is a fellow certified partner. Their entire company from day one, almost from day one, fully remote. Now it's fully remote. I mean, across the country, 147 people in 4 years.
Yep.
I mean, they've grown. They've doubled in size every 3 years. And I think they've been around for about 10. It's just remarkable, but all remote. And they go out of their way to really cultivate what culture looks like now versus through an old lens, because that old lens will get us, and it's just going to get us into trouble.
I almost wish we would have had this conversation before we met up with Jonathan, because I think he might have some particular insight on that. John, maybe we should, maybe doesn't have to record this either. Maybe we should re-engage him on that culture piece. But to your point, John, there's some industries and some sectors and some companies that are going to do really well structured that way. They're designed, and a lot of that may have to do with the leadership and their behavioral profile, may have to do with the kind of work that they do, which can happen, remote. But I do think it's a topic we should continue to understand, to research, and to share with our listeners in the spirit of at least giving them insight about what's happening, around the country, what's happening elsewhere, and maybe what they should be thinking about when discussing RTO.
Absolutely. Well, Sarah, thanks. This is good. I wanted to get it out there. I wanted to have this conversation, share these articles with our listeners, and just, again, go into the show notes, check it out, give some thought to that. It's not going away. And, who knows, these new things, of course, you and I totally embrace this. These changes, these new things are exciting. They're really exciting. The opportunities for us to flourish are so great. But not everybody looks at it that way. Hopefully this will give everybody a new perspective. But I really appreciate taking the time to talk about this.
Yeah, me too, John. This is valuable. I would say too, gosh, if you're a listener and you have a particular thought or a success story or even a challenge around RTO and all of the dynamics we face in the world of work today, shoot us an email at info@realgoodventures.com. And we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to see what you're thinking.
Great idea.
Okay. We'll see you next time on the Bosshole Chronicles.
We'd like to thank our guest today on the Bosshole Chronicles. And if you have a Bosshole Chronicles story of your own, please email us at mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. Once again, mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. We'll see you again soon.